Well, food was kind of the center of everything as I was growing up. My mom is a fantastic cook. You know, whether we were celebrating or we were mourning, there was always like food, big meals. We still celebrate big birthdays. You know, we all have our special meal that we have. And then I actually have my master's in art history and then moved to Halifax and couldn't find a job. So I started writing about food because I'd worked in restaurants for over a decade, you know, serving and kind of washing dishes or whatever, and really fell in love with that kind of environment and, you know, nurturing people and giving people that experience. So I just love restaurants. It's fascinating, I think, because I think us joining Canada had a large impact not only on our immigration waves, but then that also impacted what we were eating and where we were eating it. For example, the Chinese restaurants, you know, prior to 1949, the majority of Chinese restaurants or Chinese-owned restaurants in Newfoundland would have served British or English food. So they were restaurant owners, but they weren't necessarily serving their own cuisine. And so into the 1950s, we see like a really big rise in Chinese restaurants. You know, we also see their Lebanese. We had Lebanese populations prior to that, although we don't really see a lot of Lebanese food in St. John's. I wish there was more. But, you know, I think before then, our immigration waves were very British, Irish, and, you know, whether that was on purpose or just the way it happened, you know, I think there were probably some exclusionary practices that were going on prior to joining Canada. There was a big change. The few in my book, we think about Wood's Candy Store that was opened in the 1900s, early 1900s through the 20s. Very like classic, you know, British food. It was like the place to be seen, you know, and then once you get into like the 1950s and 60s, you see a really big explosion of different types of food. And pizza. I was thinking about Mary Brown's. I was thinking about Mary Brown's. And the fact that the two gentlemen who opened it read an ad in the Montreal Gazette in the 60s and were like, oh, I want to open up this franchise. This, you know, it was the Golden Skillet and now it's Mary Brown's. But, you know, they probably would have never read that had we not joined Canada. So who knows? They may have never seen that ad. We may never have had Big Mary's. So, because I do think that we were kind of looked upon like, you know, I heard a reference that, you know, Newfoundland has a lot of beige food in their restaurants. So it's like a lot of deep fried seafood or fish and chips. You know, I mean, Jigs is pretty beige, delicious, but beige. But yeah, so I think, you know, we were viewed in a way that was kind of boring or homely. Ironically, in a lot of ways that British food, I think, is also looked at. So I do think they were able to elevate it in a really interesting way that put us on the map in a different way. Now, I do, like, St. John's is definitely like a culinary destination for many people. It's like a big place. People come here and they want to, you know, try different foods. And, you know, we are able to serve game in restaurants where the rest of Canada, you cannot serve wild game in a restaurant. So you know, we have different rules here. So I think that's really interesting as well. I mean, I do think that, you know, especially in recent years, we've looked at, you know, kind of higher end restaurants like Raymond's or Mallard Cottage that have really been able to kind of put Newfoundland food and Newfoundland ingredients on a different pedestal and putting it on a national stage that people never really considered before. Whether that's, you know, foraged mushrooms or local berries, you know, cod sounds at Raymond's. You know, I think that we were able to kind of reconceptualize how we look at Newfoundland food, because I think for a lot of years we were looked at restaurant food. Newfoundland food wasn't necessarily in restaurants. I mean, you were getting a Jig's dinner maybe at the Irving, Donovan's Irving or wherever, but for the most part, Jig's dinner is served at home. So I think being able to like use those kinds of ingredients and foodways in restaurants like Raymond's and Mallard Cottage did really impacted how the rest of the world saw what we ate and respected it in a different way. I have spent a lot of time traveling around the world, and, you know, I think I have, for the most part, identified as a Newfoundlander. Most people will recognize Newfoundland if it's not come from away or it's from, you know, lots of other people who travel. I think I recognize myself as a Newfoundlander first. That said, I am truly proud to be Canadian, because I do really feel like, you know, on the world stage, you know, from politics to culinary cuisine, you know, I do think that we have a special place on the global scale, but Newfoundland is a very special